The third reel tells the story of a 22-year-old Etienne Nivert, a film student in London. Now, having fled South Africa in 1986, yes, at the time of Thatcher and the anti-apartheid campaigns, when he then starts a relationship with a German expat, Axel. He starts to become obsessed by a lost film made in Berlin in the early 1930s. Now, his quest to find the film will take him to East and then West Berlin. At that stage, of course, Berlin was still divided by the wall. To talk to us about this book, well, we are joined in studio by the author, SJ Naudé. Very good morning to you, SJ. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Evan.
The third reel is interesting only for, I think, those who kind of film buffs who really know that films used to be made on 3 reels, and the third reel is the third reel in this case.
Indeed. Yes, there was, in the 20s and the 30s, film was seen as fleeting entertainment, and no one really thought of archiving and preserving films. So there's a whole catalogue of films that we know were there, or of which certain fragments might remain, or perhaps just promotional posters, but which are indeed lost. And so this book took that as one of its premises.
Now, Etienne, who's the key character, Etienne Nivert, becomes obsessed by a lost film made in Berlin in the 1930s. Without giving too much away, what was it about the film that he found so captivating?
So the film itself is it's a fictional film, one that I've devised for this book. It's based on a book by a Jewish German intellectual from the 1930s, in which he describes in short essays or in short pieces the Berlin of his childhood in 1900, which quite poignantly he knew at the time would be, or had a good inkling would be destroyed, as he was writing this in the early Nazi era, in the early 30s. So so it's quite complicated why he gets interested in this. In part is also his lover, Axel, also leaves for Berlin while they're both living in London. Axel also goes missing. He just disappears, and then Etienne goes on this rather labyrinthine search for both this film and for Axel, and it takes him to, it exposes him to all kinds of dangers and risks and interesting scenarios in both East and West Berlin.
The sort of backstory of it also is maybe that during that search is the search of self and finding meaning and identity in a way.
Sure, he's a character who's finding himself in between apartheid-era South Africa, from which he's escaped. He's from the then conservative city of Pretoria. He finds himself in between, as I say, apartheid South Africa, Thatcherite Britain, which was quite an oppressive place in itself, and then this furnace of geopolitics at the time that was Berlin, and specifically also East Berlin with its own
Nazi Germany, of course.
Indeed. So the backstory is Nazi Germany, and the current story is 1980s East Berlin, amongst other places. So, and then these characters are the young people living in cities with these rather innocent, perhaps somewhat misplaced ideas about utopian ideas, about
idealism,
how one can live in a city, how one can be radically free.
It's beautiful to be young and naive, isn't it?
Quite. Yes.
I want to ask you about the reception that you've had for this book in the UK thus far.
I've had it's still to be, the publication date hasn't come yet, but there have been people tend to give these so-called shouts or blurbs. So I've had a very positive, enthusiastic response from people who have read the book already. A very generous response from an American novelist by the name of Garth Greenwald, who, if I may read it myself, said it's haunting and brilliant. And those are his words, not mine.
Haunting and brilliant, I love that. Now, you're also going to make it available in Afrikaans, so you're going to extend that? Is that the way you're kind of looking?
It's already available, I think, it should be this week on the shelves in both languages, both the Afrikaans and the English. The English called, as you say, the third reel, and the Afrikaans is called DERDE SPOEL, as in film reel or film spool.
Well, you've written in Afrikaans extensively. Alphabet van die Falls was awarded several prizes, I think back in 2012, was it? Are you now shifting over, or are you kind of looking at more international exposure in disguise?
You know, it's kind of a language is kind of a complex matter for me in some ways. I spent much of my adult life outside South Africa, and even though my first language is Afrikaans, but didn't really speak it for about 16 years, then returned to South Africa and it sort of re-emerged suddenly. And so I write in a sort of a parallel process now. The Afrikaans and English emerged somehow more or less at the same time. Or some of it is written in Afrikaans, some is in English, and then I finished two versions in each language, you know, a version in each language.
I have a lot in common with you with regards to that, because my first language is Afrikaans, but I was always told that you don't speak it well enough, so you have to speak English. It's just one of those true South Africanisms.
It's a very South African thing to live in between languages, isn't it?
It is, but we can be so snobby about the languages, you know, in certain patches. Absolutely. What's next for you? What do you want to do?
It's a difficult question. I've been writing full-time for a few years. I had the University of the Western Cape has a very generous grant for writing, which they gave to me for the writing of this novel, which allowed me to write full-time. And there's some promotional activity around this novel, and then I think I'll see what follows upon that. Writing is a tricky business.
Yeah, it's a tricky business. I'm told to write, but I'm too afraid, to be honest with you. It's just too daunting, and some people say it's just too much of an expensive luxury to have.
It's certainly it's a bit of a lonely exercise. It's you and your computer screen, or your typewriter if you're old-fashioned, and as you say, it's not a very lucrative industry. Except for one or two, you know, writers who have major numbers of international readers.
What about the kind of fraternity in South Africa and the readership that we have in South Africa? Are we still reading? Are we still interested in reading?
I should start perhaps with the writing fraternity is certainly quite a supportive and a warm, relatively small community.
Yeah.
And you know, coming back after I was a lawyer in my previous life when I lived in New York and London.
You're looking for salvation then?
I was indeed, and I found some of it at least. So after being a corporate lawyer in the Northern Hemisphere, coming back to this warm little community of South African authors was quite pleasant. Readers, there's a relatively small number of enthusiastic. Committed readers in South Africa.
Your story sounds like the monk who sold his Ferrari a little bit.
Yes, that Ferrari is long gone.
It's long gone. SJ, fantastic to talk to you. Great story. Just pick out the book there, guys. This is a book you should be reading called The Third Reel. It's an interesting story that connects South Africa with Margaret Thatcher's Britain and Nazi Germany, I think, in a sort of way that will be really cool for you to interact and take you to those places. A great read. SJ Naudé, thank you very much for being with us. Great to have you with us here in studio. That is the author of The Third Reel. Make sure you... Where do we get this book, by the way? All good bookshops?
It should be in all good bookshops,
Okay.
Yes.
All good bookshops. That's what it is. Otherwise, just go on Facebook and go and harass SJ Naudé. You'll find it. His real name is Fani, actually. So, there you have it.